Sometimes bad things happen, and sometimes you may be asked tough questions in your life, such as, are you the monster? Slapface is a Shudder original, written and directed by Jeremiah Kipp, who's directed various shorts as well as full-length features like Creepers, Love and Everything in Between, The Sadist, and Black Wake. And it stars August Maturo as Lucas, a troubled young boy, along with his older brother Tom, played by Mike Manning, that are living in the deep woods in their parents' house and struggling to make ends meet. Basically, things got really goddamn fucked. They lost their parents in a tragic accident, and there's a backstory that we find out as the movie goes on during this 85-minute runtime. And Tom's old enough to work and feels a responsibility to take care of his brother, his deeply, deeply troubled younger brother. Not that Tom is necessarily a saint, but holy fucking shit, you find out some stuff going on, and then you just discover stuff through pure action, not even necessarily storytelling. We're like, wow, this family might have been snake bit from the very beginning. And there are also, there are some bullying elements in this. That's a bit of a trigger warning right there, but there's young woman named Anna, played by Libby Bauer, who was in ICU. She was really one of the only bright spots. There's a few girls that bully young Lucas. Mariah, played by Maribel Lee. And two sisters, Donna and Rose, the D'Ambrosio sisters. I hope I pronounced that right. And then also there's a monster. Yes, sorry, there's a monster. If you haven't read the description, that's a bit of a spoiler right there. But it's played by Lucas Hassel. Lucas with a K, not Lucas with a C, like August Maturo. And basically in this, what happens is there's a tragic accident that takes the parents of Tom and Lucas away. And Tom's working. He's trying everything he can to keep the family going. Lucas, even though he goes to school, you barely see him at school at all. He often will just wander around the deep, deep woods that they live in. And also there's this legend of this Virago witch. Not the Figaro witch. It's not Figaro Castle. We're not going to burrow ourselves in the sand like it's Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy III in the States, but enough about video games. Basically, Lucas, he's not doing well. I mean, as nobody would be doing after losing their parents, but he gets bullied. It's very obvious that this movie is an allegory for you shouldn't bully people. You shouldn't bully people in general, family or otherwise, because you never know how it's going to manifest. The three girls do end up bullying him as well, even though one likes him, maybe doesn't like him. And Tom kind of channels a bit of how the dad acted as well, and is kind of a drunk. And, you know, there's other stuff here and a lot of themes as you peel back the onion layers and realize, there's a lot of fucked up people in this movie. And even though I will say that none of the performances are necessarily bad, there are quite a few that are just one note, and the characters are just put in there simply to, you know, be bodies to get taken care of. The one thing I will say about Jeremiah Kipp is he obviously has passion for it. One of the shorts that he did was a short for this, you know, story, and now it's fleshed out into a full-length feature. And Shudder hasn't always hit the high notes. There are some originals that they've done or exclusives that aren't all that great. Even if they didn't have a hand in them, they just got the rights to them. This is one that, while uneven at times, does hit the high points. And with this movie, basically Lucas goes to this thing called the Wakefield House, and on a dare from these girls, these three girls, Mariah, Donna, and Rose, you got to bring us a gift, and then you can join our group, the Nightshaders. And then he goes in there, and because he's a troubled young boy, he's just wrecking up the place. And then, holy shit, there's suddenly this weird cloaked big nose figure, the witch, Virago witch, and he takes like a little toy thing, a little toy soldier, because it turns out that this witch may have actually trapped future, or previous children in there, as opposed to future children, like I just tried to say. There's something a little bit weird about this house. It's an abandoned house. What it used to be, who the hell knows? Let's just realize that there's this weird witch there. Or is it a witch? Could it possibly just be something that's a manifestation of imagination? These things are explored as the movie goes on. But there are some violent points, and if anybody has been bullied, and I'm talking bullied to the point where you've been bullied by a family member and other stuff, some of this stuff may trigger. That's just a bit of a warning for you guys. But I will say, as far as the main characters, August Maturo does pretty goddamn well. And Mike Manning isn't bad. Anna isn't really given, or like Libby isn't given much to do except look good, and she does look good, I will say that. But there are good, elements like, oh, Anna and Tom get together, but it's a quick spark relationship, and then it's fractured because Tom isn't necessarily the best at handling this stuff, and Anna doesn't want to be confronted by this emotional distress. So yeah, it's an allegory for bullying and how people handle it and how people would manifest this stuff, and could it be possible that Lucas might be a vicious goddamn killer? All these things are explored as things go on. Now, I will say that the story isn't necessarily deep beyond like just being psychologically damaging. There are some fucked up horror elements. I could have done without the animal violence. Yeah, sorry, there's a bit of animal violence. Even though it's mostly off camera, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I'm not faulting the director. These things, it made sense why they did it. But it was still a little, I was like, okay, alright, I could have done without that. That being said, there's a lot of good to dissect in this movie, and it's well worth checking out on Shudder. I'm not going to get way too deep into the rest of it until I get to spoilers, but it's something that handles the bullying element among family members pretty well, and just bullying in general, and how some weird goddamn shit can happen. This movie is also filmed in like late 2019. Post-production was delayed due to the pandemic, and it was just finally delayed. So this movie's actually been in the can mostly for a while, and there's a ton of executive producers on this that were family members of some of the cast members, so it was obviously a small staff. That's nothing against that. You go with the people you can go with, and hell, if you can get some friends together and get some family that you trust and do a great indie horror movie and explore these elements, then good for you. And manage to get a distribution on Shudder, and that's a pretty big platform, especially for horror fans. So I would say that this movie overall is quite good. Not perfect. Again, some issues. I wasn't necessarily... It's a good thing they didn't show the monster a little bit too much, because again, budgetary issues. And a couple of the performances are kind of meh to me. But it served its purpose and definitely succeeded more than it failed. So now I am going to get into spoilers, but it's on Shudder, so check it out, absolutely. And 3, 2, 1, spoilers, go. Okay. The accident took the mother and father. It turns out the father was really goddamn crazy. The sheriff talks about this and said, he would come around the house, and he couldn't come around the house anymore. It was kind of implied that maybe he was sleeping with the mother, maybe he wasn't, who knows. And maybe the dad led to the accident with the mother, and that they both died because the dad was just fucked up in the head. Lucas ends up playing this game with his brother, and this is why I kept it for spoilers. They play this game called Slapface, where they just slap each other, and it's a way to get their aggression out. That doesn't exactly seem like a healthy way to do shit, and is a form of bullying, even though, it's like, oh, he's trying to tell him, Tom's trying to tell him, don't tell. But then Anna sees it, and Anna, it has a little bit of witchy stuff about her. She has a pentagram thing and says, oh, is there a monster hurting you? Is this girl that you say likes you, is she the monster that's hurting you? It turns out one of the girls, Mariah, actually does like Lucas, but also doesn't, because she's friends with these twin girls, so she's kind of a two-faced bitch that meets a proper end, just saying. She gets her head bashed in at one point. I'm not saying that, that's what should happen to bullies, except you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And it does turn out that there's a manifestation, but it's a manifestation of the evil and the bullying and everything that Lucas has dealt with. And that's ultimately what ends up leading to the conclusion of the movie. There is some violence and some disturbing stuff, and Lucas can't handle this, because nobody at his age, he's like 11 or 12, I think. I'm not exactly sure on his age. You can't handle that shit, really. You really can't. And eventually, it comes to pass that after dispatching the witch, it turns out that actually, oh shit, maybe Lucas was the monster all along, which, yeah, that's the mystery. I assume that much with how this was going, but again, I'm not faulting the movie. It just does feel like they took a short concept and they had to stretch it out just a little bit. They also kind of had to rush things right at the end. It was like they did some nice suspense building and they did some good stuff, and they did the animal violence, and oh shit, this witch is causing these issues, or maybe it's Lucas really causing this, since Lucas is the only one seeing it, or maybe Lucas isn't the only one seeing it, because then suddenly Anna sees Slapface and ends up trying to shoot it. That doesn't work. She ends up getting killed and buried in the woods, and then Slapface ends up crushing Mariah's skull in. And then Lucas is arrested, but then the police are all dispatched. Anybody who tries to hurt Lucas ends up getting killed. And they keep playing the Slapface thing and stuff like that. It is an allegory for bullying. And it's not the worst thing in the world to tackle it like this, but it could be uncomfortable for some people. Again, the movie isn't perfect, and it does turn out that Tom ends up getting slapped down, and even though the witch is killed, oh no, maybe Lucas was the one that did it and slapped him down and shot and stabbed him, because Tom had a gun. Tom was also an abusive drunk, and maybe Lucas was crazy like his dad. Maybe Tom wasn't that far behind, and maybe that family tree just could do with a little trimming. There are a lot of things kind of up in the air, but more or less this movie explains enough to make you realize that there's some fucked up shit going on. I will say, though, issues aside, again, like some of the performances are kind of just one note. Some of the characters are kind of cast off really goddamn quickly. It wasn't the most wholly original thing, but as far as how it handled its themes, I think it hit the mark pretty goddamn high. I'm going to say B+. Check it out on Shudder. It is well worth checking out. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Recklin. I'll see you soon.